they've announced they're going to be voting against the GST break for Canadians over the next couple of months. Something that's going to help people at a time where they need that little extra help. But he doesn't care about helping Canadians. He just wants them to suffer more. So maybe he has a chance.
Why don't we have a real election about taxes? He can run on his tiny 2-month tax trick, and I'll run on my common sense plan to axe the tax and axe the sales tax on new homes.
We want to reiterate our demand that the Liberals fix the checks. They expand it to include seniors, people living with disabilities. We need to see real relief for Canadians.
We've got some breaking news this hour. The federal government has tabled just part of the affordability package it promised last week, introducing a bill in the House of Commons for a 2-month GST holiday on a suite of items, but not including their promised workers' benefit, which would have sent $250 checks to everyone who earned less than $150,000 in 2023. That separation appears to be a move directed at appeasing the NDP, who called for exactly this, saying they want to support the GST break right away, but they want the rebate program changed and expanded to include students and seniors who didn't earn income. Will the move pay off, or could it backfire? Let's bring in our front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's a senior advisor at Spark Advocacy and North Star Public Affairs now. Jamie Ellerton is a conservative strategist and the founding partner of Canaptus Limited. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Belanger is with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And Marika Walsh is a senior political reporter sitting right next to him with the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. We were kind of, the anticipation was high, Marika, about what they would do here. It's not really a surprise, ultimately, I think, now that they've decided to separate the two things so that the GST stuff can go ahead. What happens to the checks?
Well, that's a big question. They didn't have a dance partner for the checks, so they couldn't have put that in the bill and expected it to go through. But, the NDP last week went from supporting the policy to saying they didn't understand the policy, to saying they don't support the check policy, to saying they wanted a change, to saying it was an ultimatum that they needed to change. So it's a lot to keep up with, and maybe also for the government. The government's response so far in the House of Commons, at least from the Prime Minister, from the Finance Minister's office, it seems very uninterested in expanding those checks. It would be hugely expensive if they do that. Millions more people would qualify. So it's not clear to me how this goes forward and whether the NDP will actually get a win or whether the government will say the opposition stop the checks.
As far as wins go, Carl, does separating the checks, like from the GST, so let's say for all intents and purposes, the GST stuff now does go ahead. Does taking away the check part of it, at least in the near future, diffuse or dilute the potential political impact for the government?
Actually, it spreads it. If they get their way, it will spread it over a few more months as opposed to one shot and it's done. So in that sense, it's not that bad for the government. But the problem for them is the backlash, right? How goes the song again? Money for not taking checks for free. Well, I guess if you don't get checks for free for everyone, then you have some people will be upset about it. And this is where, Doug Ford perhaps had a better political formula, which is checks for everyone. Doesn't matter what you made. Doesn't matter if you're a kid. Doesn't matter if you're a senior.
Yeah, to be clear, we're talking about good politics, not necessarily good policy.
And that's where I was going in terms of public policy.
Who?
Exactly, right? So in terms of public policy, of course, they're both terrible ideas. But one obviously did not get the backlash that the other is getting because of the choice they made in terms of the demographics that will receive those checks. And so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it's interesting watching the Liberals from a communications perspective, Jamie, navigate the check question, because when the NDP kind of changed its position, I was thinking to myself, I feel as though their inbox was reflective of mine after this announcement, which was inundated in particular with seniors who said, all of these people who made 149 grand are getting a check and I'm not. I imagine even more people reached out to the NDP, which kind of informed how their position changed. What does the government do on this question? I know they're trying to aim this at people who make money but feel like they can't get ahead. If you do include seniors and students who aren't working, what does that do to the message you're trying to land?
Well, I think like everything, it doesn't make logic or sense. The Liberals are literally making it up as they go along right now. This was nothing more than a political stunt to try and entice the NDP to get behind this so they could ultimately pass the supplementary estimate so the rest of government's actually funded for the rest of the fiscal year. And the politics of this are royally screwed up. And as a result of everything going through a choke point in the PMO, they screwed this up as well. I think when you look at kind of what this is to now, I think what you heard in the clips that you let off the segment with, Vassy, was quite a contrast that conservatives will definitely welcome. You could have Justin Trudeau trying to like sprinkle this like holiday GST thing that's kind of hard to wrap your head around as to what's covered, what's not, and now the whole complicated layer of the check stuff on top of it. Or we can actually just go to an election where you're going to have someone offering a vision that will allow all Canadians to keep more of their hard-earned money and not have to pay the CRA to send it back to us.
What's your take on that, Sabrina? Do you think that is the sort of way in which it's being framed for Canadians, or do you think that the Liberals might get some play out of, as we're showing a list of these things, toys, video game consoles, Christmas trees, if there is a holiday on them?
I think at the end of the day, I agree with Carl. I think it's actually smart politically to have these as two separate bills and to be communicating on them at two separate times, one now and one in the spring when the GST or the rebate checks are actually meant to go out. I think that this has to be considered within the suite of the affordability measures that the Liberals are taking that have helped all Canadians, right? And just because this particular measure, when we're talking about the checks, is aimed at working Canadians, doesn't mean that the Liberals have ignored seniors. They have, in fact, reduced seniors' poverty the most in the last 10 years of their government. We have a dental plan that has specifically targeted seniors. We have increased OAS. And I think one of the things about this particular way that this has been framed, both on the GST side and on the check side, is that there's a little bit of that intergenerational fairness, right? Like we do focus a lot on seniors, and I think that's good. As somebody with an elder parent, I think that that's something that's important to me. But also, as a millennial, I want to get ahead as well, and I am the kind of person that this is targeting, where you feel like you do need maybe that little extra support. And so I think that it's important for them to couch it in that message, that there are other groups that they need to be supporting at this time, and that's where this measure has come in.
Let me bring in some cross politics here, because I think Sabrina makes good points about what, from a policy perspective, Marika, the government has done so far that does address the needs of seniors. The issue is, in the past 3 months, there's been now two things that they've done, not vote in favor or not support what the Bloc wants to do on seniors. And then today, that I swear to goodness, like 90% of the mail I get in the past 3 months has been reaction from seniors to those two things. And seniors are the last demographic to stick with the Liberals, which is kind of interesting too, I think.
Yeah, there's a few things going on there. I mean, first it speaks to who is still watching TV and reading things like my newspapers. And thank you for watching and reading and clicking on the stories.
I got no issue with that.
I'm not sure how many of my friends are tuning in to what the Globe and Mail puts on the front page every day, but seniors definitely are. And I think that's part of why we're hearing from it. They're very plugged in. The Liberals are trying to win over younger generations. They've been doing that since the budget. And they do, you're right, have that demographic with seniors, but they know that it's not enough to win election. And they are, I think, with this policy, responding to the critiques of the last 3 years of affordability crisis coverage and questions about how the government's supporting population, because everything else was targeted. Mm-hmm. And the questions were always, what about the average Joe who just feels like they can't get ahead? This is their response, and they are still wearing problems for it. You can see why Doug Ford just, as you said, decided to go for everybody, but it costs a lot more money.
Carl, what do you think about
Well,
that?
the problem is that what have you done for me lately, right? It's always the case in politics. Like all these policies, well, maybe they were done, but it's been done in the past. And people are hurting now, and they want to know what's happening to me now. And what's happening is that I'm not getting a check as a senior. I'm getting a lump of coal in my stocking, right?
And you also didn't want to increase OAS for older,
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, and not, again, to Sabrina's point, they did boost it for 65 to 74, but the story now is that they won't for those older than 74.
That's right. So these things add up, and so the problem is now that they're at risk to lose yet another demographic to somebody else who I don't know. In Quebec, certainly the Bloc has made inroads with that request, and the Liberals denying it, gave them wind in their sail.
Okay, I got to take a quick break. We've got a lot more to discuss, including the meeting happening on our watch as we speak between the premiers and the prime minister. They're, of course, talking about that big threat from incoming President Donald Trump, who says he's prepared on day one of his presidency to slap a 25% tariff on all Canadian exports going into the U.S. We'll talk about that next.